We're here in the Zendo of the Center to talk about all the ways in which Zen and tea are one flavor. In discussing anything Zen, it's important to start with a caveat, with a warning, that there's a lot of places that Zen goes that words and discourses cannot follow. There are aspects of Zen and its relationship to tea that can really only be expressed in the drinking of tea. And this is why very often when I serve tea to people, at the end of a silent tea session, at the end of an hour of drinking bowl after bowl, I will express my gratitude to tea for providing me with the artistic medium to express my Zen, and to do so without words, in a non-verbal way. And I often say to my guests that before we start a discourse, before we start to talk or have a teaching, it's important for them to know that more of what I have to say about tea, more of what I have to say about Zen, was just said in the bowls that we've shared, was said in the tea itself. If I sat here and spoke to you about Zen until the end of time, it would not express as much Zen as a single bowl of tea. Nevertheless, I feel that a little bit of history and even the etymology of the word Zen will help you to understand a little, at least intellectually, about how Zen and tea relate to each other and why they've been discussed as though they are one flavor for so many centuries. As we travel back in Zen, we travel back into the realm of mythology, into the stories that inspire us. The beginnings are always stories. They say that the Buddha and his monks were in retreat on Vulture's Peak, and during the rainy seasons, every evening, the Buddha would ascend to his cushion and teach the monks for an hour to inspire and motivate them to practice more the next day, and also to help elucidate many of the obstacles and challenges that they would face in their practice. And on one night, many centuries ago, the Buddha ascended his dais and sat before the congregation of monks and held forth a single lotus. And to their surprise, he said nothing. That lotus was his teaching for that day. And they say that one of his brightest students, Mahakashipa, saw that flower, and in the seeing of that flower was awakened. Something was transmitted between the Buddha and him. And that transmission was the beginning of Zen. And then from teacher to student, that transmission was handed down until we get to the 28th patriarch of Zen, Bodhidharma. And Bodhidharma brought this flower, this flowering of consciousness to China, where the soil was fertile to be planted. When Bodhidharma came to China, he established Zen on 4 principles. The first, direct transmission between teacher and student. Second, no dogma, no doctrine, no scripture. Number 3, must lead to the heart of a person. And number 4, must reveal the truth of nature as it is. Now, if you analyze these 4 foundations, you can see that, in a way, what we think of ordinarily as Zen, in terms of Zen Buddhism, is slightly at odds with the Zen that Bodhidharma founded in China, because he said direct, non-verbal transmission between teacher and student, and no dogma, no doctrine, no scripture. So Zen was something else. But before we discuss exactly how that relates to tea, we can also discuss the etymology of the word Zen, which I think adds to the dialogue, adds to the conversation, and helps us to get a little clearer understanding of why tea and Zen have such a long marriage together. The word Zen is Japanese in origin. It comes from the Chinese Chan. In the south of China, that was pronounced Can, and the Japanese heard this and pronounced it Zen, which is where we get the word from. Now Chan, the Chinese, comes from the Sanskrit dhyana. This dhyana, this is what Bodhidharma brought to China. This is that flower. And dhyana, like Chan, like Zen, it's a very difficult word to translate. The closest we can come in English without using pages and pages of description is the meditative mind itself. Dhyana, Chan, Zen, these are the meditative mind. This word signifies the meditative mind itself. So Zen is the meditative mind. And while Zen Buddhism can be a basket that transmits Zen, the meditative mind, it can also get in the way, which is why Zen masters throughout the centuries have always used other non-verbal methods of expressing the meditative mind to their students. Everything from martial arts to calligraphy, poetry, and more than any other art, tea. The relationship between Zen and tea goes back many, many centuries. Every single tea mountain in China has a Zen monastery on it. The Zen monks were perhaps the first humans to domesticate tea. We know of the historical importance of the relationship between Zen and tea because when the monks of Japan traveled to the mainland to bring Buddhism back to Japan, whether they went north, south, east, or west, they often came back not just with Buddhist scriptures and Buddhist iconography and Buddhist wisdom, they also came back with tea and tea seeds and teaware. And sometimes the Japanese people would ask them, "We sent you there to come back with Buddhism and Buddhist scripture. Why did you bring this plant back with you?" And some of them wrote treatises, or they spoke very clearly that the masters in China have expressed to us that if Zen is to proliferate in Japan, then tea must also, because they are one flavor. And what those masters meant was that the meditative mind, Zen itself, Chan, Dhyana, that must proliferate. Not just the exterior clothes, not just the Buddhism, not just the chanting and the methods of meditation, not just the colors of the temple, not just the life ways or the rules of monastic living, but the meditative mind itself, that essence that was transmitted from the Buddha to Mahakashyapa and down and down and down to Bodhidharma, to Huineng, to all the Zen masters that have come. So when we say that tea and Zen are one flavor, we are saying that tea and the meditative mind are one flavor, not tea and a particular religion are one flavor. Not tea and a kind of Buddhism are one flavor. One of the things I'm most grateful to tea for is that it has given me the instrument, the medium, to express my Zen in a non-verbal way. This is such a powerful gift. It's such a powerful tool because whenever we give teachings in words, even these teachings, as I talk to you now and teach you about my perspectives on Zen and tea and how they are one flavor, the words themselves represent concepts. And the issue with concepts is that the listener can either agree or disagree with the concept, can be a believer or a non-believer. So whatever teaching I give you, there will be some people that will agree with that teaching and some people that will disagree. When I say that Zen and tea are one flavor because of this, some people will agree, some people will disagree, some people will be apathetic, some will be inspired, and some will not. But when I hand you a bowl of tea, it's a pure, unadulterated expression of the meditative mind. And while you could say, "I don't want this bowl of tea," it would be absolutely absurd to say that you disagree with it or you don't believe in it. How can you not believe in it? It's there before you. And so having an art to express one's meditative mind is very powerful. In fact, one of the reasons that Zen and tea have been married for so long is that tea has this magic ability to act as a bridge from the sacred to the profane, back to the sacred, in either direction. Now, most of us in this complicated world full of distractions, we need more Zen in our life. And so we use tea primarily as a road to the sacred. We use tea to cultivate the meditative mind, to cultivate more mindfulness, more awakening, more compassion and service in our lives, all of the qualities that we long to be. But this bridge can also go the other way. Many meditators come to find that, especially after years of meditation, the insights and peace that is cultivated on the cushion sometimes doesn't translate into daily life. And without a way of articulating our insights, articulating our wisdom, in other words, without a way to live it in our ordinary day-to-day existence, it's not real. And somehow tea helps translate this bridge. It helps bring what you've cultivated on the cushion. It helps take those insights, those experiential insights, that wordless, formless emptiness, and translate it to the everyday. Because what could be more everyday than drinking a cup of tea? What could be more plain? After breathing, drinking is our most basic function. And so if you can fill that with sacred energy, if you can fill that with the meditative mind, with dhyana, you have found that the meditative practice that you've cultivated for many years has now reached and found its way into your day and into all of your affairs. Ultimately, why I express my Zen through tea is because I'm a Chajin. There's an old Zen story. I asked the radish picker for directions, and he pointed the way with a radish. Why did he point the way with a radish? Because he's a radish picker. And if you ask a man of tea for directions, he points the way with tea. One obstacle that many meditators face, that many spiritual practitioners face, is that over time we develop this conscious or unconscious idea that we become more spiritual by doing a particular activity more. In other words, we create an image of what a spiritual version of ourselves looks like. We get that image from our tradition, from a book, from a scripture, or just from some idea that our higher self has given to us in intuition. And we create this version of ourselves that we think we should be. And then we strive to fit ourselves into that mold. The problem with working in this way is that even if you get yourself into that mold, all throughout the day, the real energies and dispositions and impulses will start to come out, and you'll have to push them back in and come out and push them back in and come out and push them back in. The Zen perspective, the Zen practice, is to take that spiritual mold, crush it into dust, and sprinkle it all over this ordinary life. If you want to be more spiritual, it's not about doing more yoga or practicing more zazen or doing any one particular activity more. If you want to be more spiritual, expand your definition of what you call spiritual. In other words, take the insights that you cultivate in your yoga practice, your tea practice, your meditation practice, and start to apply them to all the other activities that you must do in a day. Start walking up the stairs mindfully and with presence and compassion. Start brushing your teeth with presence and compassion. Start eating with presence and compassion. Whatever means of cultivation you have, whatever tools you have, you cultivate insights. Those insights are powerful and transformational, but they need to be articulated. They need to be articulated into the daily life. They need to be applied. They need to change the way that we live in order for them to be actually effective. Not only that, but once we have learned to articulate them in our lives, once we have learned to live our practice, in other words, we also need a way to express and share that with others. We need an art to express and share our insights. There's a very old Zen saying in Chinese that's quite poetic, which is to taste sunlight, clouds, and wind. To taste nature. It's a sentiment that expresses an ideal that's very prevalent in Taoism and Zen alike. And in fact, in much of traditional Chinese culture, which is the idea that there are many things in life that we have to be and do completely with all of ourselves. And that the moment we try to philosophize or articulate or think in concepts, that thing is gone. The moment you try to catch Zen, like a boy trying to catch the wind, you open your hand and it's gone. It can't be held by the mind. It can't be held in logic. It can't be caged in the confines of the mind. So this ideal of doing and being completely in the moment, spontaneously arriving with precisely what is needed in the here and now, articulating the insight of enlightenment in this moment perfectly, without any of the confines or constriction of ordinary rational thought. That is a bit of what Zen is pointing at. But again, those words, that philosophy, those concepts can only go so far. And from that point where those words and concepts end, that's the point at which tea can begin to take us the rest of the way, to that space, that meditative mind where you're so present and in the moment. There's no time for thought. They asked one of the greatest ballerinas, "How do you perform so beautifully?" And she said, "When I'm on stage, there is no music and there is no me. There is only dance." And so the ideal of Zen and Taoism alike is that state of what's called Wu Wei, that state of being so completely and effortlessly in the moment that you respond with precisely what is needed here and now. And you could say that it is the Tao itself, it is Buddha nature itself, articulating itself through your actions. In other words, the tea journey begins with this seed that sprouts and becomes a tree, and then the leaves are picked and hopefully produced with mastery, with Kung Fu, and with also a respect for nature. And then the leaves come to us, and if we prepare them with this Zen mind, with this meditative mind, then we are as natural a part of the unfolding of the tea as the flower or the sprout, as the birds and the animals that lived around the tea tree. We are as natural a part of its life cycle and its process as all of its environment. We bring it to its culmination, but only if we're in Zen. And to be effectively in that meditative mind, in that Zen, you have to ignore all of what we're discussing here. And so, in typical Zen zaniness, I would like to undo everything I've just done, to unsay everything I've just said, and invite you instead to share a bowl of this month's Zen blend with me, and in that way, perhaps touch the Zen mind with much greater clarity and understanding than anything we've discussed here. May you all find the tea in your Zen and the Zen in your tea.